Austin, Texas. 9 o'clock at night. Inside the director of marketing's office at Dragonfly Tech, Ethan Cole signed the last document on his desk. He let out a long sigh, the decision finally settling in his bones, heavy and cold. He picked up his phone and made the call. It connected on the second ring. Leo, hey, can you do something for me? I need you to draw up a divorce agreement. There was a sputtering sound on the other end of the line. Leo Garcia, who'd been mid-sip of water, sprayed it across his desk. Jesus, man, what did you do? Did you cheat on her? Just get it done as soon as you can, Ethan said, ignoring the shock in his friend's voice before hanging up. Leo stared at his phone. The call ended. He frowned. Knowing Ethan, even if he had cheated, it was impossible that Khloe had. After all, she was the one who had pursued Ethan back in college, not the other way around. Unless, Leo thought, a knot tightening in his stomach, could Khloe have actually been the one to cheat? It was past 9 when Ethan pulled into the driveway of their sprawling home in Barton Creek Estates. As he walked through the door, Khloe was there to meet him, a warm, welcoming smile on her face as she untied her apron. Honey, you're home. Go wash up. Dinner's almost ready. She took the briefcase from his hand, her movements full of a familiar, easy grace, and set it aside before gently trying to steer him toward the downstairs bathroom. But Ethan stood frozen, watching her, a sharp, bitter pain twisting in his chest. Her dark hair fell softly over her shoulders, framing a face that was, as always, impossibly lovely. Her skin seemed to glow under the warm lights of the foyer, and the simple white silk nightgown she wore made her look innocent, almost angelic. She was just as beautiful as the day he'd met her. Ethan? What's wrong? Khloe stopped pushing, turning to face him. Her large, clear eyes were filled with confusion, their gazes locked. For a moment, seeing the unguarded tenderness in her eyes, Ethan felt a wave of dizziness, a memory of a time when that look was all that mattered. His wife was still so beautiful, so perfect. How could her heart have changed so completely? I'm not hungry, he said, his voice flat. You go ahead, without another word, or even a glance at the steaming, fragrant dishes waiting on the dining room table. He turned and walked up the stairs to their bedroom. Khloe watched his back until he disappeared from sight. The smile finally crumbled from her face, and she couldn't hold it in any longer. 2 silent streams of tears traced paths down her cheeks. Upstairs, Ethan stared at their wedding photo, taken 3 years ago. Khloe, radiant in her white dress, was holding on to him, her face buried in his shoulder, beaming with a happiness that felt like a lifetime ago. When did it all go wrong? When did she change? He remembered the first time he saw her, 6 years ago, at a University of Austin track meet. They were both sophomores. The difference was, Khloe White was already a campus legend, the girl next door everyone was in love with, while Ethan Cole was just another quiet guy in the engineering department. That day, dragged to the meet by her roommate, she'd lost her student ID. He could still picture her frantic face as she and her friend retraced their steps, searching fruitlessly. Back then, you needed your ID for everything: meals, library access, getting into the dorms. Losing it was a massive headache, and by some twist of fate, he was the one who found it. Khloe White. He'd read from the card. He didn't know if he was lucky or unlucky. Finding the ID of the most popular girl on campus was one thing. Getting it back to her was another. He'd heard the stories, of course, but he'd never seen her in person. On a dare from his roommate, Ethan did something completely out of character. He didn't go to the lost and found. Instead, he posted in the massive, overheard at UA Facebook group, a message that stuck out like a sore thumb amidst the day's memes and event chatter. Found. Student ID for Khloe White. Looks like you dropped it near the stadium. I'll be at the Student Union food court for the next hour if you want to grab it. Khloe, seeing the post after a friend tagged her, felt a wave of relief followed by a pang of anxiety. The post had already racked up hundreds of likes and comments. The poor guy who found her card was probably getting swarmed, and Ethan had been mortified by the minor celebrity the post had given him. But it worked. It was how they met. Because of that silly Facebook post, they started talking, and slowly they became friends. He learned that Khloe, the campus sweetheart, was even more beautiful when she smiled, with 2 perfect dimples that could make a guy forget his own name. He learned that her reserved nature wasn't aloofness, but a shield. What surprised him most was that the girl everyone saw as just a pretty face was also brilliant. She was on the dean's list, had aced every advanced placement course she could, and had already won 2 state-level academic awards. She was a sophomore, But her drive and intelligence were completely overshadowed by her reputation. And Khloe discovered that the quiet engineering major, who'd been so embarrassed by his moment in the campus spotlight, was actually fascinating. He was the first guy she'd ever met who could blush at a simple compliment. But what really sealed it was discovering his passion. Ethan and his roommates had started an indie game studio, pouring their nights and weekends into developing their own games. He wasn't a smooth talker, and he couldn't string together the kind of sweet nothings other guys used, but being with him felt solid, safe. Because it felt so safe, she turned down all the others, the ambitious sons of wealthy donors, the handsome frat presidents, the upperclassmen who already had promising careers lined up. She rejected all of those clear, easy paths and chose Ethan. It was the beginning of their junior year. She was the one who asked him out. Ethan could still remember the overwhelming joy of that day, Khloe's kindness, her ambition, the way she would cling to him when they were alone. It was everything he never knew he wanted. She was the kind of partner everyone dreamed of, and in the envious words of his roommates, he was the lucky bastard who had somehow won the lottery. Soon after they started dating, Ethan went from being an anonymous tech guy to one of the most talked-about students at UA. Not because he was Khloe's boyfriend, but because of that little indie game studio. In the second semester of their junior year, the endless runner game he and his roommates had spent over a year creating was finally ready. After they launched it on the App Store, the response was explosive. In the first month alone, it was downloaded over 7 million times, generating nearly $500,000 in in-app purchases. For a student project, the numbers were staggering, and they were still climbing every day. That one game made them famous. Investors came knocking. After careful consideration, Ethan and his friends accepted a few rounds of seed funding. They hired more people, expanded their vision, and got serious. In just 4 years, that dorm room project became Dragonfly Tech, a company with a valuation approaching $1 billion. At 27, Ethan Cole was a board member and the director of marketing at Dragonfly Tech. Even after multiple rounds of funding had diluted his initial stake, he still owned 30% of the company, giving him significant power. His 2 college roommates, while holding smaller shares, were also top executives. One of them was Leo Garcia, who, after years of grinding, now ran the company's legal department. As he liked to say, "Now that I'm not broke, I don't feel like working myself to death." As Ethan's closest friend, Leo had been there for the whole story. He'd watched Ethan and Khloe meet, fall in love, and get married. Khloe, meanwhile, had taken a different path. Her outstanding undergraduate record earned her a full scholarship to grad school at UA. After finishing her master's degree, she was hired back by the university as an adjunct professor in the sociology department. The next morning, Ethan woke up and opened his bedroom door to find Khloe curled up on the floor, where she had apparently spent the night. She looked like a lost kitten, huddled against the cold, her beautiful face stained with the dried tracks of last night's tears. A wave of pity, sharp and unwelcome, washed over him. He bent down and lifted her into his arms, intending to carry her to the bed. The movement, gentle as it was, woke her. Khloe blinked, rubbing her swollen eyes. When she realized she was in her husband's arms, a brilliant smile broke through her exhaustion. She wrapped her arms around his neck instinctively. "Are you an idiot?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. "There are 4 guest rooms in this house. You couldn't find one of them? I was scared you'd get hungry during the night," she mumbled into his shoulder, her voice thick with sleep and hurt. "I was just going to wait for a little while. But I must have fallen asleep." Ethan heard the tremor of vulnerability in her voice, but he forced himself to remain cold. He couldn't afford to soften, not when he knew what she was. He couldn't forget that she was a cheater. He laid her gently on the bed and turned to leave, but she grabbed his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Ethan, please? Can you stay home from work today? Just for one day, please?" He refused to look at her, to see the desperate hope in her eyes. "Let go." "No." He tugged his hand, and fresh tears instantly welled in her eyes, spilling over. "Honey, please, just one day with me." He stared at her stubborn, tear-streaked face and said the only thing he could. "Is there anything you want to tell me?" It was the same question he had asked in one way or another for 2 months. And every time, she had disappointed him. This time was no different. Khloe's hand fell away. She looked down, her shoulders slumping like a child who had been caught doing something wrong. Her fingers twisted in the hem of her nightgown as she remained silent, letting her tears fall onto the duvet, one drop at a time. Ethan left, the weight of his disappointment pressing down on him. She knew what he was asking. Of course she did. But it was a secret she could never tell. A secret she hoped, prayed, he would never find out. She lifted her head and watched his retreating back, a dull ache spreading through her chest. Leo Garcia showed up at the office uncharacteristically early, bursting into Ethan's office without knocking. Ethan looked up from his monitor. "Do you have it?" Leo slapped the folder containing the divorce agreement onto Ethan's desk, but kept his hand firmly on top of it. "Before you take this," he said, his voice serious, "I have to ask, do you have proof?" A bitter smile touched Ethan's lips. He swiveled his chair around to face the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the endless stream of cars on the street below. Proof? If he hadn't seen that picture 3 nights ago, the thought of divorce would never have even crossed his mind. 3 nights ago, while Khloe was in the shower, her phone had buzzed on the nightstand. Ethan, who had been working on his laptop in bed, picked it up on impulse. What he saw on the screen sent a jolt of pure rage through him. His hands clenched into fists, his nails digging so deep into his palms they nearly drew blood. It was an iMessage from an unsaved number. There was no text, just a photo of his wife. It was a picture of her from the waist up, her upper body completely bare. Her face was flushed, her lips slightly parted. The photo captured the full, perfect curve of her breasts. The skin whiter than snow, so delicate it looked like you could bruise it with a touch. It was the part of her he had always found most intoxicating. What made him want to vomit was that he knew instantly that it was real. He knew her body better than his own. He knew the tiny, barely visible mole on her waist. And it was there in the picture. He had lain in bed for hours that night, his eyes wide open in the dark, unable to sleep but terrified of what he would say when she came out of the bathroom. Then, in the dead of night, he heard it. The soft click of the bedroom door as Khloe snuck out of the house. He opened his eyes. The room was pitch black, but he knew she was gone. In that moment, the rage vanished, replaced by a hollow, relentless pain. "Khloe, are you on your way to be with him now? When did you become so cheap? Someone he can just summon whenever he wants." The same woman who had been calling him honey just hours before was now sneaking off into the night. "Can someone please tell me?" he thought. "What the hell is love?" Leo could see the answer in his friend's posture. Ethan wasn't going to talk about it. "Look, man," Leo said softly, "you know Khloe better than I do. Are you absolutely sure about this? Once you file these papers, there's no going back. And I'll be honest, I always envied you. I envied that she chose you." With that, Leo left the office, closing the door behind him. Ethan sighed, the bitterness flooding back. Did he really know her at all? He clearly knew far more than she thought he did. So what was the point of her desperately guarded secret? He had spent the last few days thinking, turning it over and over in his mind. If you can't hold on to sand, you just have to let it go. Her secret was a riddle he no longer wanted to solve. But one question still gnawed at him. Could that other man really make her happy? He had to know the answer. So, for the past 3 days, he'd had a private investigator looking into it. He shouldn't have. The results made him wish he'd stayed ignorant. 3 months ago, his wife had gone to a downtown clinic for a gynecological exam. That was the first piece of information from the P.I. The second was 2 names. Jenna Reed and Rick Miller. Jenna Reed. Ethan knew the name. She was Khloe's best friend from college. He remembered having to go through Jenna a few times to pass messages to Khloe when they first started dating. Rick Miller, a man with a criminal record for petty theft, currently unemployed. He was Jenna's boyfriend. Why would Khloe be drawn to a man like that? Ethan asked himself the question again and again, but no answer came. All he knew was that divorce was now the only solution. Legally, her infidelity meant he could leave her with nothing. But he couldn't do it. He decided to give her $3 million. With that, at least she could live comfortably. It was the least he could do to honor the years they'd had together. Tonight, he resolved. I'll tell her tonight. Better to rip the bandage off quickly. Time, he hoped, would do the rest. 8 o'clock that evening. Ethan was in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on a huge meal when Khloe came home. "Honey, you're back early." She kicked off her shoes and, bubbling with excitement, threw her arms around him from behind. Peeking over his shoulder, she saw the counter laden with food. Roasted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, sautéed asparagus. All her favorites. A wave of emotion washed over her. But this sudden change in his behavior felt both wonderful and terrifying. More than anything, it made her deeply uneasy. "Let go. I'm cooking. Go wash your hands. We're about to eat." "Okay, honey." She released him, but then, Before heading to the bathroom, she scampered back, stood on her toes, and planted a quick, soft kiss on his lips. "Thank you for cooking." This time, Ethan didn't pull away. Let this be the last memory, he thought. They sat down at the table, the aroma of the lovingly prepared food filling the air. "You need to eat more," Khloe said, her voice bright. She picked up her fork and began piling food onto his plate until it was overflowing. Then she sat back, a wide, expectant smile on her face, and waited. She held the smile until her cheeks began to ache. But Ethan just stared at his plate, unmoving. Finally, Khloe's smile faltered. She looked down and took a small bite of rice, and then the tears started. They fell silently into her bowl. Mixing with the rice, she continued to eat, one small, choked bite at a time. Seeing her like that, Ethan's eyes reddened. How had they gone from being inseparable, from talking about everything, to this suffocating silence? They had loved each other so much. How had they ended up here? "Are you stupid? Can't you even serve yourself?" he said, his voice thick. He reached over and placed a few slices of chicken on her plate. It was her favorite. Khloe looked up, a watery, grateful smile breaking through her tears. She ate every last piece of the chicken, not bothering to wipe her eyes. After dinner, they sat on the sofa in the upstairs living area. Neither of them spoke. Khloe curled into a ball, hugging her knees to her chest. Ethan stared out the large window at the distant, blinking city lights, feeling just as silent and remote. Finally, he turned his head and looked at his wife, his expression grim. "Khloe, is there really nothing you want to tell me?" At the sound of her name, spoken with a softness she hadn't heard in months, a flicker of hope ignited in her eyes. She uncurled and scrambled over to him, wrapping her arms tightly around his waist and burying her face in his side. But she said nothing, and then, another terrible, crushing silence. That was it. Ethan was done. His hope finally extinguished. He pried her hands off him, his movements rough. He went into the bedroom and came back with the folder Leo had prepared. He slammed it down on the coffee table. He gritted his teeth and forced out the words he'd been holding back for days. "Khloe White, let's get a divorce." Khloe's head shot up, her eyes wide with terror. She scrambled off the sofa and threw herself at him, clinging to him desperately. "No, Ethan, I don't want a divorce," she sobbed, her voice cracking. "I don't want this." But Ethan was resolute. He peeled her hands away from him, his touch cold and final. "Then tell me," he snarled, his voice low and dangerous. "Tell me who Rick Miller is. Tell me why you cheated." Without waiting for an answer, he turned and stormed out of the house. The word hung in the air, a poisonous accusation. Cheated. For Khloe, it was like a lightning strike. "Cheated?" she whispered to the empty room. "Honey, I didn't cheat." Her face went deathly pale. She stumbled to her feet and ran for the door, intending to chase after him, to tell him everything. But in her haste, her foot caught on the edge of the rug, and she went down hard. "Ethan, I didn't cheat," she cried out, her voice echoing in the vast, empty house. "I really didn't." It had never occurred to her that this was what he thought, that he believed she was unfaithful and wanted to leave her because of it. If she had known, she never would have kept it a secret. An idea sparked through her panic. "Jenna. I have to find Jenna. He might not listen to me, but he might believe someone else." Without a second thought, Khloe scrambled up and ran out of the house, not even bothering to change out of her slippers. After leaving the house, Ethan drove straight to the office. He stood before the massive window, looking down at the glittering tapestry of city lights below, and let the silent tears fall. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. It was the P.I. He answered. Mr. Cole." The man's voice was hesitant. "We found something unexpected." "What is it?" "That guy, Rick Miller. We dug a little deeper. Turns out about 6 months ago, he was in some kind of accident. He lost all function, you know? As a man." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. He felt the air leave his lungs. All this time, he was convinced she had cheated. But if Rick Miller was impotent, then she couldn't have. It was impossible. He had been wrong. Horribly, catastrophically wrong. He hung up the phone without another word. "Khloe, I'm so sorry." He bolted from his office, racing to get home, to fall at her feet and beg for forgiveness. Just as he got to his car, his phone rang again. It was her. He fumbled with the screen, his hands shaking as he answered. For a moment, there was no sound. He could only hear a faint knocking. Thinking her voice was too quiet, he put the call on speaker. Knock, knock, knock. Who the hell is it at this hour? He heard Jenna Reed's annoyed voice, followed by the sound of a door opening. Then, a shocked gasp. Khloe. Jenna's voice was laced with a guilt Ethan could hear even over the phone as she took in Khloe's appearance. The tear-streaked face, the tangled hair, the fact that she was only wearing one slipper. But Khloe grabbed Jenna's arm like a drowning person clutching a lifeline. Jenna, please, you have to help me, she begged, her voice thick with sobs. I didn't cheat. Can you please tell Ethan for me? He's going to divorce me. He thinks I cheated. What? Ethan's divorcing you? Jenna's surprise sounded genuine, and through his own haze of panic, Ethan realized this part of the plan was news to her. Please, Khloe wept. I'm going to go back right now and tell him everything. That you two got me drunk and took those pictures to get money from me. Again and again. She turned to leave, but Jenna grabbed her arm, her grip like steel. Now, Jenna was truly panicking. Khloe, don't. If you tell him, Rick and I will go to prison. I'm your best friend. Remember? The words hit Khloe with the force of a slap. My best friend, she said, her voice dripping with scorn. You call yourself my friend? And you and that boyfriend of yours set me up? I want to send you to prison. The threat of jail time made Jenna snap. Is that really how you want to play this, Khloe? She hissed, her face contorting with rage. Do you have any idea what could have happened? When we took those pictures, I had to practically fight Rick off to keep him from crawling into that room and having his way with you. And this is how you repay me? You're going to send me to prison? Do you have any gratitude at all? Khloe stared, dumbfounded by the monstrous logic. When had her friend become so shameless, so completely depraved? In his car, listening to every word, Ethan felt like his heart was being torn out of his chest. He slammed the car into drive and sped out of the garage, following the live location Khloe was unknowingly sharing with him on his phone. It was 2 a.m. The streets were empty. His Cadillac roared through the sleeping city, the speedometer climbing past 80, 90, 100 miles an hour. He blew through 2 red lights without even touching the brakes. All he could think about was the last 3 months. The hell his wife had been living through, threatened by these monsters while coming home to his coldness and suspicion. The guilt was suffocating him. Besides, Jenna was ranting now, tears of self-pity streaming down her face. We just wanted money. Ethan has so much of it. I was your best friend in college, Khloe. What's a couple $100,000 to him? Do you know what my life has been like since we graduated? I work myself to the bone just to make rent, while rich people like you buy whatever you want. Designer clothes, luxury bags, without a second thought. I just wanted a taste of that life. Khloe glanced at the collection of $1,000 handbags sitting on Jenna's sofa, all bought with her money, and felt nothing but disgust. Jenna saw the contempt in Khloe's eyes, and her voice turned to ice. You know what? We were only going to ask for $500,000. But now, if you don't get us $2 million, I'm sending those pictures to Ethan. And then I'm posting them all over the internet. If you're going to ruin our lives, I'll ruin yours right along with them. Khloe fell silent, a cold fear gripping her. If Jenna did that, Ethan would never forgive her. He would leave her for sure. Just then, Rick Miller stumbled out of the bedroom, shirtless and squinting. He saw Khloe, disheveled and weeping, and a twisted smile spread across his face. There was a broken, desperate beauty to her that, to his shock, stirred something in him that had been dormant for half a year. Well, look who it is, he sneered. Come to make another delivery? I thought we agreed that my girl and I set the schedule. Rick, she's going to tell Ethan everything. She wants to send us to jail. Rick's face darkened with rage. He lunged forward and slapped Khloe hard across the face. You little bitch, you think you can send us to jail? He roared. Jenna, get her in the bedroom. By tomorrow morning, she'll be begging us to keep our mouths shut. At his words, Khloe began to struggle violently. If they got her in that room, it was over. She would be utterly destroyed. Before, Jenna might have protested. But now, seeing prison looming, her own survival kicked in. She held Khloe tight while Rick moved to shut the front door. As the door swung closed, plunging the entryway into darkness, Khloe's heart filled with despair. Ethan, she whispered, closing her eyes. I'm sorry. Crack. A sound like a gunshot exploded through the apartment. The front door flew off its hinges, slamming into Rick and sending him sprawling to the floor, his head cracking against the tile. Blood streamed from a gash on his forehead as he howled in pain. Who the hell are you? He screamed. Jenna froze, staring in terror at the man standing in the ruined doorway. It was Ethan. Let her go. His voice was terrifyingly calm. His eyes were like chips of ice. Jenna flinched back as if burned, her hands falling away from Khloe. Ethan strode past her and gathered his wife into his arms. He saw the red handprint blooming on her pale cheek, and his heart clenched. He gently traced the mark with his thumb. "Ethan, you came," Khloe sobbed, the last of her strength giving out. The brave front she had maintained shattered completely, and she collapsed against him, weeping uncontrollably. "You heard, right? I really didn't cheat on you." Tears of shame and regret streamed down Ethan's face. "I know, Khloe. I'm so sorry. It was all my fault. I'm so sorry." He held her tighter. "Why didn't you tell me? I never would have put you through this." She buried her face in his chest. "I was scared," she whispered. "I was scared you'd think I was dirty, and that you wouldn't want me anymore." "Never," he murmured, pulling back just enough to cup her face in his hands. "I will never not want you." He lowered his head and kissed her. A kiss full of apology, relief, and a love he thought he had lost forever. For the first time in months, Khloe smiled, a real, radiant smile, and kissed him back. She was about to close her eyes when she saw it. A flicker of movement behind Ethan. Rick, dazed but furious, had grabbed a fruit knife from a side table. "Ethan, look out!" In a single, fluid motion, Khloe twisted in his arms, putting her body between him and the threat. Rick had been aiming for Ethan, but he never expected her to move. The blade plunged deep into Khloe's abdomen. "Khloe!" Ethan's world narrowed to a single point of horror. He kicked Rick with savage force, sending him flying across the room, then sank to the floor, catching his wife as she fell. Just then, two large men in suits, Ethan's security detail, burst through the door, panting. They had gotten his frantic call and arrived just in time to see the attack. They immediately moved to restrain the now screaming Rick. "Call 911. Now!" Ethan yelled, his voice cracking with panic. He knelt on the floor, cradling Khloe, staring at the knife buried in her stomach and the dark blood spreading across the fabric of her nightgown. One of the bodyguards fumbled for his phone, while the other called the police. Ethan stroked Khloe's pale, sweat-slicked face, then looked at the subdued Rick, his eyes burning with a murderous rage. "Keep him alive," Ethan snarled at the second bodyguard, his voice a low, guttural growl. "And make him hurt." The man didn't hesitate. He began landing a series of brutal, precise kicks to Rick's torso. "Ethan, it hurts so much," Khloe whispered, her breath hitching. Tears streamed down Ethan's face as he held her tighter. "Don't talk, Khloe. Just hold on. The ambulance is coming." He felt a sudden warmth spreading across the hand he had pressed against her wound and knew it was her blood, soaking his fingers. In that moment, the powerful CEO of a billion-dollar company broke down, sobbing like a lost child. Khloe gasped, a fresh wave of pain making tears leak from the corners of her eyes. She raised a trembling hand to his face, a face that wasn't conventionally handsome but was strong and kind. The face she had chosen in college, the one she wanted to grow old with. "Ethan, I never cheated," she managed, each word an effort. "You're the only man I've ever loved." "I know, Khloe. I'm so sorry. I misunderstood everything." He lowered his head, pressing his cheek against her hand, so she wouldn't have to strain. "I'm so happy," she whispered. "But I don't think I can stay with you much longer." "Don't say that, Khloe. Please don't say that. I always wanted to have a baby with you, but you were always so busy." The faint note of complaint in her weak voice tore him apart. "Hold me." Ethan wrapped his arms around her as tightly as he dared, and then her body went limp. "Khloe?" he choked out. "Khloe!" His desperate shouts echoed through the apartment, startling neighbors and causing lights to flick on in nearby windows. He ordered his men to find Rick and Jenna's phones, to locate every copy of those photos and erase them from existence. Just as they finished, the wail of sirens grew closer. The red light of the "in-surgery" sign finally went dark. The doors swung open and a renowned surgeon from St. David's Medical Center emerged, pulling off his mask. "Mr. Cole, the surgery was a success, Dr. Evans said, his voice calm and reassuring. "The knife missed all vital organs. Your wife is stable. She should wake up in a couple of days." "Thank you, doctor. Thank you." Ethan pulled a business card from his wallet and pressed it into the surgeon's hand. If there is ever anything you need, anything at all, you call me. Dr. Evans nodded and accepted the card. The moment the doctor was gone, the strength drained from Ethan's legs. He slumped against the wall and slid to the floor, finally allowing himself to breathe. It was the morning of the third day when Khloe finally woke up. She turned her head and saw her husband slumped in a chair by her bed, his head resting on the mattress, fast asleep. A tender smile graced her lips, her dimples reappearing. She reached out and gently stroked his unshaven cheek. The light touch was enough to startle him awake. He shot up, his eyes wide with concern. Khloe, you're awake. How do you feel? It still hurts. A little, she said, her voice raspy. But seeing you makes it better. Ethan chuckled, a wave of relief washing over him. She was still his quirky, clever girl, the same one he'd fallen in love with all those years ago. She frowned slightly, a flicker of worry in her eyes. He knew what she was thinking. Don't worry, he said softly. It's all taken care of. Those two are going to a place where they can't hurt anyone ever again. Okay, she whispered, the last of the tension leaving her body. She shifted carefully, wincing a little, and wrapped an arm around his waist. By the way, do my parents know? Oh, they know, he said with a grimace. Your mom and dad flew in and read me the riot act for not taking care of you. My own dad kicked me a few times on your behalf. But once they saw you were recovering well, they went home yesterday. Khloe giggled, the sound weak but happy, easily picturing the scene. Seeing her laugh, Ethan smiled too. Humph, serves you right, you big dummy, she teased. You didn't take good care of me. Ethan just nodded, accepting the blame. I know. I'm sorry. It was worth it to hear her laugh again. She found out later that Rick Miller was sentenced to over a decade in prison for blackmail and aggravated assault. Jenna received a lighter sentence, but Khloe didn't care about the details anymore. It was over. 6 months later, on a sun-drenched beach in Hawaii, Ethan Cole lay back on a lounge chair, sunglasses on, enjoying the warmth. Every few moments, he'd lift his head to watch Khloe, who was running along the edge of the surf in a brightly colored sundress. Honey, come chase me, she called out, her laughter carried on the ocean breeze. He watched her, a hand protectively hovering over her gently rounded stomach. Hey, not so fast. Remember there's 2 of you now. Ethan sighed, a wide, helpless smile spreading across his face. He pushed himself up and started after her. For the last 6 months, they had been traveling the world. The day after Khloe was discharged from the hospital, Ethan had resigned from his position at Dragonfly Tech, cashing out a portion of his shares and walking away from the empire he had built, never looking back.